How different is Hillary Clinton's carefully choreographed rollout in Iowa from those of other candidates? Joining us now from San Francisco, Jeff Greenfield, a veteran political analyst who's worked for ABC, CNN, and CBS. And Jeff, you've covered a lot of campaigns in your time. How did you feel watching all this media chatter about the Scooby-Doo van and Chipotle and all the other assorted craziness?
My first reaction as someone who's always loved American politics was to seek refuge in a Trappist monastery for 18 months where there was no email, TV, or newspapers. I mean, there was a certain farcical element to all of this. But if it is possible to have any sympathy for any politician, 8 years ago, when Hillary Clinton went to Iowa, there were huge crowds. It was a big rollout, and she was criticized for the regalness, the kind of inevitability. And I think what's happened here is remembering that it is April, the year before the election. This is not the definition of her campaign. Your guests earlier, I think, were quite right. She is not going to be able to spend the next year or so run up to the nomination just meeting with, quote, everyday people and avoiding hard questions. It's different fundamentally, though, A, because she is the presumptive Democratic nominee. Right. That may be wrong. And second, she is one of the best-known people in the world and has been for a couple of decades.
But let me jump in and ask you this. So this whole idea of sort of having, politicians like to say they're having conversations with ordinary people. A lot of candidates do version of this. Is that even really possible in an age when lots and lots of cameras are following you around and everybody's on Twitter and all of that?
I think it is inevitably a contrivance. I was trying to think, Howie, did Ronald Reagan spend a lot of time sitting down with, quote, everyday people? Did John Kennedy? Did Franklin Roosevelt? It was a different era. Television and the web has made politics, in my view, too much a sense of personality-driven, as opposed to getting up and telling people what you intend to do as president. No, I vividly remember being in New Hampshire when Pat Buchanan was talking to one poor soul on a freezing street somewhere in Manchester, surrounded by maybe 100 reporters. It is inevitably, I think, phony. No matter who's doing it.
But now, if there's also the question of who controls the message. So if reporters had had a crack at Hillary, certainly somebody would have asked about the New York Times story this week saying that she had declined to answer back in 2012 when a congressional committee asked her about, did you use a private email server when you were Secretary of State? At the same time, you say a lot of candidates have done this, but not usually in the first week of a rollout when you say, hey, folks, here I am running for president.
Look, I think the campaign was trying to figure out a way not to make her seem like the Kate McKinnon caricature on Saturday Night Live, which, by the way, is far less friendly than Amy Poehler's was, as this power-driven person.
Devastating.
Yeah, but I still want to make this point that two things. One, depending on where you are politically, people can either look like they're power-mad or assertive. Ted Cruz got to the Senate in 2013, began running for president before he knew where the light switches were. But if you like Ted Cruz, that's not a criticism. And I do think, by the way, there is a whiff of a phrase I ordinarily don't use. There is a whiff of a sexist attitude about when a woman seeks power. But the more important thing is, in my view, okay, if you're a reporter and you don't want to spend your life explaining what the order was at Chipotle, what do? I was struck by a really interesting piece in Politico by a writer named Michael Cruz, who went to this Chipotle and then interviewed not Hillary, but the workers, and did a really interesting piece on what is it like to work at a place like this. Can you make a living if you're an entrepreneur? That's the way you can creatively use what a politician does without focusing on her pantsuit.
That's a good example of enterprise reporting. Stick around.